Look closely at the map of the Middle East. Beneath the noise of missile threats, a silent, flawless geopolitical trap has just been snapped shut. The world watched the United States tighten a naval noose around the Strait of Hormuz, suffocating Iran's economy. But the final blow didn't come from Washington. It came from the East. When Pakistan quietly opened 6 trade corridors to rescue a starving Iranian economy, it looked like an act of mercy. It wasn't. It was the bait. By accepting this lifeline, Tehran unknowingly handed the keys to its national survival over to Islamabad. And just when Iran became completely dependent on those dirt roads, Pakistan deployed 13,000 troops and combat jets directly to Saudi Arabia. Iran isn't just contained. They are trapped in a masterclass of geographic blackmail. How did a few dusty highways neutralize the region's most aggressive military? Let's look at the board. To understand grand strategy, you have to stop looking at weapons and start looking at space. For years, the global perception has been that Iran holds the ultimate geographic advantage in the Middle East. They control the northern shore of the Persian Gulf. They sit atop the Zagros Mountains, an impenetrable natural fortress, and they command proxy forces across multiple sovereign borders. On paper, they look like an untouchable regional hegemon, but geography is a double-edged sword. A fortress can very easily become a prison if someone else holds the keys to the gates. What we are witnessing right now is not a traditional military conflict. It is a siege, a calculated, multi-layered operation designed to strip a nation of its offensive capabilities without firing a single shot on its own soil. This is the art of operational warfare at its highest level. It is a strategy built on 2 distinct pillars, the Anvil and the Hammer. And to understand how Iran walked blindly into this trap, we first have to look at the water. The United States military has spent the last 2 decades trying to figure out how to neutralize Tehran without launching a $1 trillion ground invasion. The answer, it turns out, was maritime dominance. The US and its allied naval coalition did not attempt to breach Iran's coastal defenses. Instead, they weaponized the ocean. By establishing a rigid, unforgiving blockade around the Strait of Hormuz, the United States built the Anvil. For a country like Iran, the sea is not just a medium of transport, it is the central artery of the state's survival. Over 80% of Iran's economy relies on the export of oil and the import of critical industrial goods. When Washington dropped the Iron Curtain on maritime traffic, the impact was immediate and catastrophic. You cannot smuggle millions of barrels of crude oil in a backpack. You need deep-water ports. You need heavy tankers. And when those tankers are barred from entering international waters, the entire economic machinery of the state begins to eat itself. Within weeks of the naval blockade, Tehran was bleeding cash. The regime faced a terrifying reality. Their missile silos were full, but their treasury was rapidly emptying. A military cannot fight on an empty stomach, and a government cannot survive if its currency collapses and its people cannot access basic goods. Iran was suffocating. They needed a lifeline. They needed a backdoor that the United States Navy could not reach, and that is exactly when Pakistan stepped into the room. On April 25th, in the midst of Tehran's worst economic panic, the government in Islamabad made an announcement that shocked Western observers. Pakistan officially opened 6 massive, heavy-duty land corridors across its border into Iran. To the untrained eye, this looked like a betrayal of the US coalition. It looked like Pakistan was throwing a lifeline to a rogue state. Thousands of heavy-tonnage containers and oil tankers immediately began flooding across the desolate borders of Baluchistan. These fleets moved relentlessly toward Pakistan's deep-water ports at Gwadar and Karachi, bypassing the US blockade entirely. Tehran celebrated. They thought they had outsmarted the Americans. They thought they had secured a permanent backdoor to global markets. But in the brutal world of realpolitik, there is no such thing as a free lunch. Pakistan was not saving Iran. They were weaponizing logistics. By allowing Iran's entire economic survival to flow through 6 dirt roads in Pakistani territory, Islamabad achieved something the US military could not. They gained total, undeniable leverage over the Iranian state. This is the concept of the Trojan lifeline. The moment those trucks started rolling, Iran's independence ended. They traded their vulnerability on the sea for an absolute dependency on land. If Islamabad decided to close those borders, the Iranian economy would crash within days. Pakistan now held the kill switch to Tehran's survival. The trap was set. The bait had been taken. It was time to drop the hammer. With Iran fully leashed to Pakistan's logistics network, Islamabad executed the second phase of the operation. And they did it with breathtaking speed. Saudi Arabia, facing the looming threat of Iranian proxy attacks and ballistic missiles, needed a guarantor of security. The United States was busy holding the naval line, so Pakistan stepped in. But they didn't just offer diplomatic support. They brought the military machine. In a historic move, 13,000 heavily equipped Pakistani combat troops touched down on Saudi soil, but infantry alone does not deter a missile strike. Alongside the ground forces came the strategic air squadrons. Pakistani Air Force JF-17S and F-16 combat jets deployed directly to the King Abdulaziz Air Base in Dhahran, located in the kingdom's eastern province. Then came the diplomatic shockwave. On May 6th, Pakistan's foreign minister, Ishaq Dar, stood before the international press and delivered a message that fundamentally altered the Middle East's security architecture. He declared Saudi Arabia a red line. He stated, in no uncertain terms, that any hostile intent toward the kingdom would trigger a devastating and unpunished response. This was not a vague threat. This was the activation of the Strategic Mutual Defense Agreement between Islamabad and Riyadh. An attack on Saudi oil facilities was now officially an attack on the sovereign military forces of Pakistan. Tehran suddenly realized the horrifying geometry of their situation. The country feeding them from the east was now standing with a loaded gun to their west. Let's analyze the battlefield geometry, because this is where the genius of the Pakistani deployment truly shines. The strategic base in Dhahran is not hidden in the vast Saudi deserts. It is located just 400 kilometers from the Iranian coastline. In the realm of modern aerial combat, 400 kilometers is nothing. It is a knife fight in a phone booth. By placing advanced fighter jets and elite troops directly on the edge of the Persian Gulf, Pakistan created a forward operating barrier. But they are not fighting alone. Saudi Arabia already possesses one of the most densely packed, multi-layered air defense grids on the planet. Riyadh operates more than 100 Patriot PAC-3 missile launchers, optimized to intercept terminal phase ballistic threats. Above that, they have recently integrated the US-supplied THAAD batteries, a system capable of killing high-altitude threats at the very edge of space. Now, add Pakistani F-16S and JF-17 Block 3 aircraft equipped with advanced electronic warfare pods and beyond visual range missiles into that defensive dome. If Iran attempts to launch a swarm of kamikaze drones or ballistic missiles at Saudi refineries, they are no longer just dealing with static defense systems. They are flying directly into an impenetrable steel net, guarded by a nuclear-armed military that is actively patrolling the skies. But the true nightmare for Iranian military planners is the two-front dilemma. Suppose Tehran orders a strike on Dhahran. Suppose Iranian missiles kill Pakistani troops stationed in Saudi Arabia. Under the defense protocols, Pakistan's military on the eastern border would immediately shift to a combat posture. Iran would suddenly face over 600,000 active-duty Pakistani personnel and 500,000 paramilitary forces pushing against the Baluchistan border. Furthermore, Pakistan's Shaheen, 3 ballistic missiles, boasting a range of 2,750 kilometers, would be spun up. These weapons can comfortably strike any military facility, command bunker, or nuclear research site deep within Iranian territory. Iran's military is built for asymmetric warfare. It is built to fund proxies and launch cheap drones. It is absolutely not built to fight a conventional, two-front war against a high-tech Western coalition in the Gulf and a massive, nuclear-armed military on its eastern border simultaneously. At this point, we have to ask the hard realist question, why is Pakistan doing this? Are they simply being a good ally? In geopolitics, altruism does not exist. Nations do not risk nuclear escalation for friendship. They do it for power, and they do it for capital. Pakistan is executing what can only be described as the most successful mercenary maneuver of the 21st century. By establishing this security umbrella over Saudi Arabia, Islamabad is securing its own future. Pakistan has faced severe economic instability at home. Saudi Arabia, on the other hand, has endless capital and vast oil reserves, but lacks the demographic weight and military ruthlessness required to deter Iran directly. It is a perfect transaction. Pakistan rents out its nuclear deterrence and its highly trained military to Riyadh. In exchange, Saudi wealth flows into Islamabad, stabilizing the Pakistani state. But it goes deeper than that. By holding the keys to Iran's logistics through the 6 trade corridors, Pakistan has elevated itself from a South Asian power to the supreme arbiter of Middle Eastern security. They have sidelined traditional mediators. They have made themselves indispensable to the United States, indispensable to Saudi Arabia, and terrifyingly indispensable to Iran. It is a masterstroke of statecraft. Let's look at the cost-exchange ratio facing the commanders in Tehran today. In previous years, Iran's strategy was simple and highly cost-effective. They would build a Shahed drone for $20,000, launch it at an enemy facility, and force the enemy to fire a $4 million interceptor missile to stop it. Even if the drone was destroyed, Iran won the financial war of attrition. But Pakistan's logistical trap has completely inverted this calculus. Today, if Iran presses the launch button, the cost is no longer measured in the price of the drone. The cost is the immediate and total closure of the 6 logistical corridors in Baluchistan. If Iran attacks Saudi Arabia, Pakistan shuts the border. Within 48 hours, the heavy trucks stop moving. The oil tankers are halted. Access to the ports of Gwadar and Karachi evaporates. Combined with the ongoing U.S. naval blockade, Iran would instantly plunge into total economic darkness. There would be no trade, no revenue, no imports of raw materials. The currency would go into hyperinflation. The streets of Tehran would inevitably erupt in mass protests as the population realizes the regime has traded their livelihoods for a meaningless military provocation. This is the ultimate checkmate. Pakistan has weaponized Iran's own economy against its military. Tehran's massive arsenal of ballistic missiles, their underground silos, their speedboats in the Gulf, they are all strategically useless now. You cannot fire a missile when the trigger is wired directly to your own nation's life support system. What we are witnessing is the birth of a new security architecture. For decades, the global assumption was that whenever a crisis erupted in the Middle East, the United States Navy and Air Force would have to step in and do the heavy lifting. Washington would bear the financial cost, the political blowback, and the risk of casualties. But the U.S. strategy here is evolving. We are entering the era of outsourced deterrence. Washington held the anvil at sea, but they let a regional nuclear power swing the hammer on land. By tacitly supporting Pakistan's military integration with Saudi Arabia, the U.S. has effectively contained Iran without having to put tens of thousands of American boots on the ground. This model of using intertwined logistics, economic dependency, and allied military geometry to lock down an adversary has profound implications for the rest of the world. Military strategists in Beijing, Taipei, and Eastern Europe are watching this exact scenario unfold. They are realizing that future wars will not just be won by who has the fastest jets or the most stealthy submarines. They will be won by who controls the chokepoints, who commands the logistical routes, and who can trap their enemy in a geographic box before the first shot is even fired. Iran thought they were playing a game of military intimidation, but Pakistan and the U.S. coalition were playing a game of geographic strangulation. Tehran reached for the bait, and the steel trap closed. History will remember this not as a war fought with explosions, but as a war won with dirt roads, naval blockades, and a 400-kilometer kill zone. The question now is not what Iran will do, because they have virtually no moves left. The question is, how long can this artificial pressure cooker hold before something breaks inside Tehran itself? Will this exact blueprint of economic trapping and proxy deterrence become the standard U.S. playbook for future global conflicts? Let us know your tactical assessment in the comments below. If you appreciate uncompromising, hard realist geopolitical analysis, ensure you are subscribed. Until next time, keep your eyes on the map. But in the ruthless arena of international relations, a cornered animal rarely starves in silence. The US and Pakistan have engineered a masterpiece of geographic strangulation, yes. But assuming Tehran will simply accept defeat and quietly collapse is a dangerous underestimation of the Iranian state. The pressure cooker is whistling, and the regime is frantically searching for a pressure release valve. To understand what happens next, we have to look inside the highest echelons of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC. The IRGC is not just a military force, it is an ideological syndicate. For 4 decades, their entire mandate has been built on regional defiance. But today, the hardliners are sitting in subterranean bunkers, staring at crashing economic indicators, and confronting a terrifying truth. You cannot fire a ballistic missile at hyperinflation. You cannot sink a naval blockade with a suicide drone when pulling the trigger detonates your own supply lines. The conventional proxy war has been neutralized, but asymmetric warfare is about to evolve into something much darker. Denied the physical domain, Tehran will inevitably shift to the digital and the deniable. If they cannot physically bomb the refineries in Dhahran without triggering a Pakistani border closure, they will try to digitally melt them down. We are likely about to witness an unprecedented surge in state-sponsored cyber warfare. Iranian hackers will launch relentless, unrestricted digital assaults targeting Saudi Aramco, Pakistani power grids, and US naval logistics networks. It will be a ghost war, an invisible campaign of sabotage designed to inflict maximum economic pain without leaving a kinetic footprint that justifies military retaliation. Furthermore, we must look at the broader chessboard. When a middle power is trapped by a regional alliance, it has only one geopolitical card left to play: summon a superpower. As the US-Pakistani trap tightens, Tehran will be forced to look north and east. They will offer their geography, their natural gas, their drone technology, and their total strategic subservience to Beijing and Moscow. In exchange, they will beg for alternative, sanctions-proof overland routes through the Caspian Sea or Central Asia. The trap set by Islamabad is tactically flawless in the short term, but grand strategists in Washington must be careful. By squeezing Iran so tightly, they risk pushing Tehran entirely into the arms of the Sino-Russian axis, cementing a unified, Eurasian anti-Western fortress.